Hello and welcome to this lecture about research philosophy. And to start the lecture, I want to talk about why do we care about research philosophy? Why don't we just go straight to the methods or something like that? And I think that it is very important to understand research philosophy because it is very helpful. First of all, understanding and having a clear idea of what is research philosophy and how that can be applied in our own research project will help us to decide practical issues like it is mentioning here. For example, if it is clear what are the philosophical assumptions of our project, it will be clear to choose which is the best method, which is the best sample, which is the best questions that we can ask. So I think it's worth investing time in there to make it clear which are the philosophical assumptions behind our research. Second, it is also important and it's an advantage to understand research philosophy because it is kind of the base of our research objectives. The objectives that we will set, I want to understand this, I want to discover that. All of those objectives have to be linked and be coherent with our research philosophical assumptions. We will discuss and I will give you some strategies on that. And finally, it is also useful to make it clear which are our contributions, where are our contributions in the literature. Like if it is clear which are, again, our philosophical assumptions, we will know which studies we are having a conversation with. That's also very useful. So overall, if we mix these 3 points, I think that it facilitates research activities. In the end, it's not anything extra. It is very useful. It helps us to decide better and also to justify. For the reader, it will be clearer if we unpack all of these things. We want to show which are our assumptions and then which are our choices. So to talk about what is research philosophy and how is research philosophy applied, I want to go back to, like, historically to the very early ages of humanity when actually science was born somehow. I think at the very early ages of humanity, we focused on understanding nature. That was a big objective, if we can call it objective. We wanted to discover how things work. Discover is a key word at this point in time because we just appeared at, well, that's a very philosophical question, but we were humans in discovering which mushrooms were good, which mushrooms were bad, all of these things. And the approach to discover that and to understand nature was trial and error. Maybe a lot of people died in that process. Maybe a lot of people got sick, but we learned a lot. And the general idea, the general assumption behind this is that nature was meant to be discovered. We came here, we appeared here to discover how things worked. Then as time passed by, we improved how we were doing science and how we were generating knowledge. But the ideas from these early ages stayed very similar. We developed what we call the scientific method. Maybe you remember this from high school, from your science courses, where the objective or the method of developing knowledge in the scientific method is to test ideas. If you think about scientific method in different areas, like maybe in physics, in biology, it's all about testing. That's why we have labs and all of these things. So it has been extremely successful for many years. It has been also extremely successful in natural sciences. And this approach, this idea of we want to discover, we want to test, is related to something that we call the positivist paradigm. In the research philosophy dimension, if we can call it a dimension, we have like a spectrum of where we can position ourselves. We can position our research. We can say that we want to position our research in the positivist paradigm, and I will explain what is that, or I will tell you what is the other paradigm in a second. But the positivist paradigm, if we decide to stay in there, it follows more or less the principle from this and this, the very early ages of science and the scientific method. This paradigm focuses on testing positively that something works. I want to test if my idea, if my hypothesis is true, if I will support that idea with evidence, with testing, all of these things. That is called positivist paradigm because it focuses on generating positive information, generating data that tells me that my idea is true, that I discovered how this works. Also, the definition of a paradigm, if you want to have the concrete definition, is that the paradigm is a scientific framework that we use to guide our research. So the positivist paradigm is a framework that we use to guide how we do it. So that is why it's so important that we discuss the research philosophy to situate and to decide in which paradigm we are going to stay, because that will guide everything. So generally, this has been very used in natural sciences, in like the exact sciences like math, physics, biology, medicine, also in engineering. And if we think about social sciences, economics, and maybe finance, the economics and finance, they also focus a lot on testing what happens if the interest rate is grow or it shrinks, and what is the effect on inflation. And then we have statistics testing if the effect is true or not, if the effect is positive or not. So most of economics and some part of finance stays in this paradigm, the idea that we can positively test, we can discover. However, there are some limitations of positivism, this positivist paradigm, but don't interpret limitations as problems, because they are not problems, it's only limitations. This paradigm works very well if you want to discover, if you want to test, it works well. But if you want to understand how a process happened, if you want to understand a concept, if you want to understand complexity in psychological or social context, it is very difficult to apply the positivist paradigm. Why? Because how can you positively test interpretations? That is a bit difficult. That's why we say it's a limitation. As social science, well, humanity became more complex, and then social sciences focus more on the social part rather than in discovering. So, for example, in marketing, it is maybe more important the social elements, the interpretations, rather than discovering. I hope that now you see why there are limitations in positivism. Also, psychological, as I say, psychological and social processes are very difficult to quantify and to test and to measure, to discover. It is more about understanding. And also, we realize that sometimes, in some cases, in some questions, interpretations are more important than positively testing something. It all depends on the question. And so it's not that you have to switch totally to this, or that you have to totally be positivist. It is about reflecting what is best for your research objective and whatever you are studying. So maybe you are very confused at this point. Don't worry. If now you learn a bit about positivism, in the next video we will talk about the other side, and maybe it will be clear. So let's stop the video in here, and we'll go continue in the next video.